Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Velyka Novosilka direction, where the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Vremivka. Also, the Russian sources published the video, real proof that the Russians established control over this territory, and this is very interesting video. I would like to point your attention on several things. First, in this video we can see two Russian soldiers that raised the Russian flag in almost the most northern part of the settlement. Another important detail that I would like to point your attention is that there are two soldiers in the bottom right corner. This is the first one and this is the second one, and these Russian soldiers were very scared and they were very sharp, taking under control the entire perimeter around this area, which means that Ukrainians most likely were very close to this territory, or maybe the Ukrainian drones were flying above the same building. So which this video confirms that at least by the end of the 17th of January the Russians indeed managed to reach the northern outskirts of Vremivka, but most likely there were still very heavy clashes on the territory of the settlement. But today, by the morning of the 18th of January, different sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take under control the village of Vremivka completely. So during the previous night, the Russians managed to enter and to reach the northern outskirts of the settlement. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians established complete control over the farms that are located to the west of the settlement. When talking about pro-Russian resources, this morning of Ukrainian time, pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to cross the river of Mokry Yaly and to enter the central part of the village of Velyka Novosilka. Summarizing everything, by the morning of the 18th of January, this territory in the central part of Velyka Novosilka most likely was captured by the Russians. Now let's discuss other important details. According to information we have, the Ukrainians from the southern part of Velyka Novosilka received an order to retreat, and during the previous night, when the Russians had less possibilities to carry out reconnaissance operation, the Ukrainians began retreating in the northern direction with the purpose to cross the river of Mokry Yaly in the northern part of Velyka Novosilka, and then to move further in the direction of the company's stronghold that is located to the northwest of the settlement. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the northern flank of the village of Velyka Novosilka, and the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the farms in the northern part. The Ukrainians will try to hold these territories as long as possible, because currently these farms is the main, territory, main stronghold for the armed forces of Ukraine that Ukrainians can use to secure the evacuation and retreat process. If the Russians are able to take this territory by the end of the 18th of January under complete control, then Ukrainians would be caught in cauldron completely. As for now, there is just operational encirclement, but once again, with the control over this territory, they're going to be a complete, the Ukrainians would be caught in cauldron. Currently, the Russians are trying to carry out several offensive operations in this direction. More precisely, there are 4 offensive operations. The first one is the Russians are trying to improve their positions in the central part of Velyka Novosilka, and the main purpose of this attack is to cut the central part of Velyka Novosilka and not to allow the Ukrainians who are currently located in the southern part of the settlement to evacuate and to enter the northern part. Another offensive operation, the Russians are trying to attack in the direction of the company stronghold that is located in the northwestern direction of the settlement. There are very heavy clashes, close combat. The Ukrainians are trying to counterattack the Russians are attacking the Ukrainians, and the main purpose of these attacks from the Russian side is to slow down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to unblock the Ukrainians who were caught in cauldron in the village of Velyka Novosilka. So this is something like an element element of active defense. The Russians are attacking to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities to attack the Russians in the territory of this small agglomeration. Another route of attack is from the northern part. As we discussed a minute ago, the main purpose of this attack is to enter the northern part of Velyka Novosilka and to take under control the northern farms. If the Russians are able to do this, then the Ukrainians who are currently located in the northern part of the settlement would be caught in cauldron as well. Furthermore, the Russians began the fourth offensive operation, and when talking about this, maneuvers, the Russians are trying to advance in the direction of the river of Mokre Yale with the purpose to cross the river and then to attack the settlement of Novocheritovate. As for these maneuvers, it's very difficult to understand what the Russians are trying to achieve by these attacks, but obviously this is something like, long-term ongoing operation, which means that the Russians most likely began the preparation before further offensive operation in the direction of the Zaporozhye and Dnipro regions from this territory. So the attacks in the direction of Novocheritovate and Skudne is a part of something new. It's not a part of the Velyka Novosilka offensive operation. It's the part or the beginning of the next stage of the next offensive operation that will take place after the fall of the settlement of Velyka Novosilka. Now let's move further. As for the Kurakhova direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything, just one video from the vicinity of the settlement of Stary Terny. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians and how the Russians were bombing and attacking the edge positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, and as you can see, this video took place in the area that was colored in Russian favor. So as for now we have some doubts whether this territory is under complete Russian control or maybe the video is archived. Anyway, despite the fact who controls this territory, most likely sooner or later this entire pocket would be colored in Russian favor. Now let's move further and let's discuss the second most important direction during these days, and we are talking about the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous night, pro-Ukrainian deputy reported, Maria Bezugla reported, she's very famous by the way, she reported that the Russians managed to enter the city of Pokrovsk. During the previous night we haven't received even a single video confirmation or confirmation from any other source that the Russians managed to do this. Anyway, this information is very interesting. Maybe today during the 18th of January somebody will provide geolocation that can confirm this. The main clashes during the previous night were taking place between the settlement of Udachne and Kotlin. As you can see, there are lots of flags, which means that there are lots of changes on the ground. Neutral mappers, pro-Ukrainian mappers, pro-Russian mappers reported that during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take at least 50% of this industrial zone in the northwestern part of Kotlin under complete control. Furthermore, the Russians and neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians managed to advance along the railways in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk from the west. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions around the village of Zvirova, taking this small village in pincers. So let's take a look at how the map was changing. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 17th of January, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 18th of January. As for proofs, we still haven't received even a single video that can confirm this Russian progress, but anyway, this information is very interesting. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to take under complete control the industrial zone that is located in the northeast, in the southeastern part of the settlement of Udachne. I'll remind you that the main purpose of the Russian offensive operation in the direction of this settlement is just to secure the flanks and not to allow the Ukrainians to counterattack the Russians from behind, while the main Russian forces are advancing in the direction of Kotlina. But after the fall of the village of Kotlina, and when the Ukrainians are forced to fall back from this territory, most likely the Russians will continue advancing to the west in the village of Udachne, because the distance between the village of Udachne and the border of Dnipro region is already less than 3 kilometers. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing on the line of the settlements by the name of Novotroitska, Novovasilievka, and the village of of Uspienovka. And according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and currently the Russians control up to 50% of the settlement of Uspienovka. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians of 59th Brigade were FPV droning and attacking the Russian units on the territory of the settlement itself. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. The situation for the Ukrainians in the Pokrovsk direction is very critical. We see that Ukrainians can't stabilize the situation, and every single day the situation is getting worse and worse for the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's move further. We received several updates from the city of Toretsk. The Ukrainians are FPV droning the Russian units on the territory of the settlement, trying to pin them down and not to allow them to finish the clearing operation before the Trump's inauguration. There are still very heavy clashes on the territory of the mine, but this morning on the 18th of January of 2025, some very reliable pro-Russian sources reported that by the morning of the 18th of January, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Krymsky. If this information is correct, then this means that the mines, the Toretsk mine, was semi-encircled from the south, southwest, southeast, from the east, and about to be outflanked from the north. So anyway, we strongly believe that by the Trump's inauguration, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this territory as well. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the territory of the settlement of Novosilka. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were attacking and bombing the Russian units in the central part of the village with FPV drones. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Now let's move further. As for the city of Chasiv Yar, we have adjusted the map in Ukrainian favor. If you remember, during the previous several weeks, we've been talking a lot that the Russians managed to encircle the Ukrainians in the micro district of Novi and in this forest. This information probably 2 weeks ago was provided us by pro-Russian resources. But today, these pro-Russian resources have adjusted his map in Ukrainian favor, saying that there are no more encirclement in this territory. Telling the truth, since the beginning we had some doubts whether there was any encirclement or not, but according to our policy, we added this polygon to map just to understand what might happen in this direction. Now the picture becomes much clearer, and in this, according to this configuration, there are very heavy clashes. There are no cauldrons in this area. The Russians continue offensive in the direction of this forest, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back. The Russians are saying that the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine in the city of Chasiv Yar in the central part is critical. The Ukrainians confirm this information. They are saying that most likely they will be forced to fall back from this territory very soon, because the Russians managed to establish complete control over the industrial zone, which was the core and the base of the entire defense of the city of Chasiv Yar. Without the industrial zone, the Ukrainians have no chances to hold their lines for a very long period of time. The Russians began another fast lightning and full-scale offensive operation in the Lyman direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly to the west of the settlement of Ivanovka. At least this information was provided us by neutral mappers. Furthermore, we see a significant number of geolocations in videos that we received from the same area. In this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian company strongholds with the use of flamethrower systems. This is very important, and we see that currently the Russians are trying to attack in the northern direction from their foothold in the vicinity of Ivanovka. So once again, most likely the Russians are planning to outflank the dense network of the Ukrainian fortifications in the vicinity of Novosilka from behind. This will allow the Russians to cut and cauldron or to encircle the Ukrainians in this area, and in the end, this attack, this advance of the armed forces of Russian Federation can force the Ukrainians to fall back towards Novosilka. And the main task and the main purpose of this attack, of these maneuvers, is to connect several footholds on the Ukrainian side of the river of Zherebets from the settlement of Terny Ivanovka towards the settlement of Makeyevka. If the Russians are able to create this huge foothold, then they will have no problem to advance further in the western direction towards the town of Lyman and towards the town of Izum. Now let's discuss the situation in the north north in Kupiansk direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions a little bit in the vicinity of Zagryzovo. As for the Sudzha direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. The sources reported that there are very heavy clashes on the territory of these pocket, but as you can see, without any changes on the ground. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, show my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.